All right. Welcome, everybody, as you're making your way in here. We're gonna kick this off now. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Steve Kennedy. I am our Organizing and Network Director here at PPP, and we're really excited to have you all join us so we can kind of talk through some of the work that we've been doing, different ways that our student and lawyer members have been involved, and ways that you can get involved yourself. This is potentially going to be like a little bit bigger, so we're not going to do like a full-on intro for everybody, all the attendees, but I would invite you all to drop your name, your pronouns, where you're from, and kind of like what brought you here into the chat, so we can kind of get a sense of things from you all. And then basically for the way this is going to go today is we're going to start off hearing from our executive director, Molly Coleman, talking through kind of our theory of change, like why we organize and what it is that we're actually doing here. And then we will hear from Ross Levin, who is one of our student organizers and one of our leadership fellows. And we'll also hear from Sejal Singh, who was one of our co-founders and is now one of the leaders in our DC Lawyers chapter and on our C4 board. And then we'll get into kind of like what the future of the organization looks like, opportunities for getting involved, and we'll open this up for a Q&A at the end. So as we're going through, if you have questions, feel free to drop in the chat. We might not get right to them, but we do have a bunch of time saved for the end to take questions. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Naomi to kind of MC us through the first half of our night.
Hi, everyone. My name is Naomi. I'm the National Organizing Manager for PPP. Today, I kind of want to just segue into Molly Coleman, who is our Executive Director and my boss. And one of the things I wanted to ask Molly to kind of get us into this is, Molly, who and what is PPP? What is our theory of change? Why are we organizing at PPP?
What good questions. I wish we had a PowerPoint to answer them. Hey, everybody. Excited to be here. Like Naomi said, Molly Coleman, pronouns are she, her. I'm based in St. Paul, Minnesota, and very excited to be chatting with you all tonight. I'm going to do a quick screen share. Is that good? Can everybody see?
I love how you made a PowerPoint.
You've got to have a PowerPoint. Let's get it actually going. Okay, PP, who are we and what do we do? I'm going to go through this pretty quickly just because we have a lot of content that we want to make sure we get to tonight. But like Steve and Naomi said, please drop questions throughout in the chat, hold them for the end. We really want to make sure that you aren't leaving here. We know there will be follow-up conversations, but that you aren't leaving here feeling like, I still don't really know what PPP is or what they do. So what do we do? We organize lawyers and law students to challenge many of the dominant frames in the legal profession and build true progressive power within the legal community. What does that mean? So our basic analysis of the landscape that all of us lawyers and law students are operating in is based on some pretty key findings from political scientists over many decades, which is that lawyers tend to be more liberal than the general population in many ways. So more likely to support abortion access and LGBTQ rights and sort of on important social issues, the legal profession tends to be more liberal than average. But there are two ways in which lawyers are really fundamentally conservative that we are trying to change. The first is when it comes to protecting systems of wealth. So if you are in law school, you probably see the fact that many of your, much of the experience is training you to be a lawyer who will protect capital, who will protect the wealthy, privileged, and powerful, and to help the rich get richer. So that happens through, sort of the idea of what is law, how we talk about the legal system, who you are, sort of like who is recruiting on campus, what job opportunities your school is encouraging you to take advantage of, but leads into how lawyers have helped to shape much larger systems that at their core serve to protect wealth and in the process, fundamentally harm workers, consumers, and everyday people. So we're working to change that. The second way in which the legal profession, despite being, generally liberal, is actually quite conservative is when it comes to systems of government design. So we talk a lot about the idea of juristocracy at PPP, kind of ruled by judges, as opposed to democracy, ruled by the people. When you're in law school, when you're a practicing lawyer, a lot of what you are being trained to do is to advance juristocracy, and that comes at the direct expense of our goal of forming a true democracy for the first time in the United States. So what does that look like? It looks like looking to judges as policymakers, looking to judges as the sole interpreters of the Constitution, rather than the people as the most important interpreters of the Constitution. It looks like hoarding knowledge within the legal profession rather than making sure that communities have the knowledge that they need to build the power necessary to create the change they want to see. And a whole host of other things that we can definitely talk about more either today or in follow-up conversations. But so sort of those two ideas, right? That lawyers, despite being generally liberal, sort of exist in many ways to protect wealth and to protect a system of government that is antithetical to true democracy that we are trying to change at PPP. So we are just trying to change like the entire legal system, the economic order and the political order. So it is good to have big goals is a defining principle for us at PPP. That all led to the creation of our mission. I try not to put a ton of text on PowerPoints, but I will just quickly read this, which is the People's Parity Project is a movement of law students and attorneys organizing for a democratized legal system which empowers working people and opposes subordination in any form. Together, we're dismantling a profession that upholds corporate power and building in its place a system that reflects our values of justice, equity, and solidarity. This is obviously taken from our website because join us is not actually in our mission statement. But if you're on our website, you could have clicked that link. So there are a number of ways that you could imagine trying to change these dominant paradigms within the legal profession. The method that we choose, the theory of change, is organizing. Why? To start, I want to just quickly go over some definitions of organizing. I think, especially right now, it's one of those words that gets tossed around a lot. Like, we're all organizers, but are we? Are we actually organizing? What is organizing? I really like this definition taken from the Organizing People Power Change Handbook. To start, here's how we define leadership. Leadership is accepting responsibility for enabling others to achieve purpose in the face of uncertainty. And here's how we define organizing. Organizing is leadership that enables people to turn the resources they have into the power they need to make the change they want. In other words, organizing is building the power we need to win. This is just a classic image and one of my favorites. Why do we think that this is the right theory of change to talk about in an organization of lawyers and law students? There are three reasons that I want to go over quickly. The first, I think, is the most sort of mindset shifting one that I had to really understand, which is that people, especially progressive people, go to law school because they want to make our legal system work differently than it does, right? They generally, I would imagine if we surveyed everybody who's here tonight, you wanted the law, the legal order, our country to work better for everyday people. There are a million different ways that you can imagine changing what our legal system looks like and thinking about the legal order that we all live within. In law school, we are taught, trained to do exactly one version of that, and that's litigation. That's a great and really critical, essential way to think about how we shape the law, how we wield the power of the law, etc. But it isn't the only way. So you can imagine a world in which law school takes people who want to think about and understand the law and shape the law, and you can imagine law schools that train people to litigate, but also to do policy work, to do organizing work, to talk about the law, to build community with others who care about changing the law. That is not the way that law schools currently work, but we think that it is really critical that people who want to make the law work better have other tools in their toolbox rather than just litigation. The second, this is like could be a 3-hour long discussion. I'll do it in 1 minute. We know that organizing has the power to shape judicial decision making. So even if your primary concern is what happens in a courtroom, what is the outcome that happens in that courtroom, We know from the historic record, we know from just looking around us, that organizing can change how judges make their decision. If you're not familiar with the work of Michael Klarman, it has been very foundational for me. Recommend looking it up. But he talks a lot about Brown v. Board of Education, something that we take as a big legal victory. But really, what he has shown is that it was a result of organizing that changed the decision making, literally, of the justices in the room and changed the outcome in that case. And the third, continuing with the Brown example, is that organizing takes words on paper, judicial decisions, and turns them into reality or not for real people. So I think that the Brown one is really, it's incredibly important, not only because organizing changed the outcome in the case, but also to the extent that the promise of Brown was ever realized for students, for people in this country. And obviously that is debatable whether we've ever fully realized Brown, but to the extent that we have, it's because of organizing. I think this stat is just incredibly powerful. So the decision in Brown came down in 1954. In 1960, 6 years after the Supreme Court issued its decision, you only had 1 in 1,000 school age eligible public school students attending integrated schools. In 1964, as a result of intense mass organizing, that had increased to 1 in 100. So that's the power of organizing. That didn't happen. Again, litigation was a piece of it. It was an important piece of the puzzle, but it wasn't the entire puzzle. So when we talk about how do we fundamentally change what the legal system looks like, how do we make the legal system work for working people? How do we build a legal order that serves economic justice rather than serves capital? We don't think that we're going to be able to do that if we just litigate. We think that we are going to do that by building our collective power in order to change the world. So that is what we are trying to do. We're not going to do case studies, but here's a fun picture of some law student organizing that happened at NYU a while back now. I will stop screen sharing and just end on this before I hand things over. I think right now we are seeing a lot of the best of the legal profession on display. And I think that we saw a lot of the best of the legal profession on display during the first Trump administration when we had lawyers working tirelessly to try to mitigate the harm that was caused by the administration. And I think what we saw after the first round of Donald Trump as president is it made very clear that litigation alone is not enough, and that if we don't think about how we are fundamentally restructuring our society, we are going to find ourselves here over and over again. Because yes, litigation might have stopped some of the worst of what the Trump administration tried to do the first time around. Yes, we can feel very confident. I think that that the legal system will stop some of what Trump tries to do this time around. But we need to be thinking about bigger, broader, more structural change if we want to prevent ourselves from needing that litigation in the first place. We believe fundamentally that lawyers, for better or for worse, are going to have an outsized impact in what comes next and how we build beyond the Trump years. The stat that I keep coming back to is, and sorry for everybody who's heard me say this a million times, but it's less than 0.5% of the adult population in the United States that has a law degree, but lawyers make up 100% of the judiciary. They make up between 40 and 60% of Congress in any given Congress. They make up, untold thousands of roles in the executive branch. And that's just talking about the federal government, right? If we looked at all of the lawyers who are in decision-making roles in state, in state government, local government, in civil society, in the private sector, there's virtually no decision that happens about what this country looks like that doesn't involve lawyers, where a lawyer is not in the room or not the ultimate decision maker. So we think that it is essential that we get lawyers to figure their shit out, for lack of a better term, here at 8:18 on a Wednesday night. We need to figure our shit out because lawyers have a big impact, and right now they're having a negative impact, and we think that we can change that through organizing. So that's what's up with us. I will hand it back over to Naomi.
Thank you for that, Molly. I love that getting our shit together because I think as an organizer, working for PPP, I think everybody needs to get their shit together right now. And that is actually going to lead me to one of my favorite people getting their shit together, which is Ross Levin. He is one of our student organizers at Fordham University. And Ross, I kind of want you to talk about like getting involved with PPP, but also the amazing campaign we're trying to get off the ground. What tools of organizing you've used in that campaign, and really like how you feel PPP has given you the tools to like push forward what you're trying to do.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Ross Levin. My pronouns are he, him, and thanks for the introduction, Naomi. I mean, briefly, the support from everyone on this call in finding a place in the legal profession as someone with progressive values and in trying to change Fordham while I'm there has been invaluable. I've been a PPP fellow since 2023, and I first got involved after actually going to a law and political economy event. And I heard Lester Spence, a political scientist, speak, and he said, 40 years ago, or maybe 45 years ago at this point, the Federalist Society was a fringe little group, and they built over time and took over. And I mean, look, we don't have the billionaires on our side, but we can do it too. And we're in these institutions, and so it's worth taking seriously that we can contest them and use them as sites of political struggle to achieve what we want. So kind of forming a vision and getting the language for how to really put that into action has been something invaluable that I've taken away from PPP. And I think let me give a concrete example of that that'll tell you a little bit about the work that I'm doing at Fordham too. So I'm trying to work with other students and faculty and other people to expand our loan repayment assistance program. So, after graduation, Fordham will already help to pay a portion of students' loans if they work at a nonprofit. But we want to raise the salary cap on that. We want to expand the types of work that's eligible, not just nonprofit, but also government. We want to really make it so that it's more financially sustainable to be doing public interest work. And look, that's important for me. That's important for other people graduating from Fordham. And it's also important to kind of, in a small way, shift the center of gravity of the legal profession and make sure that public interest is a priority of the administration at Fordham, to be as annoying as possible in their ear while I'm here, and to make sure that support is there, to use the money that the institution has to support not just myself, but a lot of other people who are going to be doing great work, who will take those tools and do incredible things that I would never have thought of myself. And so one tool that I've gotten from PPP's support that has been helpful is just like the language of how to talk about this even. Like when I go to professors, how can I pitch some of these ideas to them in a way that they'll really listen to? And one phrase that I've heard at PPP that's been helpful is public interest drift. Like there's a whole literature out there on the financial pressures on people who enter public interest work. It's the cost of living is rising for everyone. The salaries are higher in the private sector. And that term, public interest drift, and describing, how the school could play a role in moving us from public interest drift to creating a public interest pipeline, has been really powerful in getting the professors, some of the deans, and other decision makers to listen when you have a few students in a room trying to tell them, look, there are students on Medicaid, there are students on SNAP, there are students who need to go to their parents for money in the summer, and then a lot of students who can't do that, or students who are working more than they should be while they're in law school. Like, these are real financial struggles, and unfortunately, some of the professors just see it as students coming to whine. And so the support from PPP has helped to have the language and the framing to turn that into a message that they'll listen to. But also not just the language, also the planning of the campaign, and trying to figure out like how do we do this in a pretty corporate friendly environment, and do it in a way where things can actually keep moving forward, even though every law student is already overextended as it is. So that's a bit of an overview, I guess. Just to get into for a minute some of what I've been working on. I've been working on like a survey for public interest students at Fordham that's almost ready to launch. And hopefully that will be a tool after I graduate that the next year of Fordham students can use. I've been working to form a committee of public interest students, meaning students who want to see initiatives at the school to support public interest work, and working on an open letter, a petition in support of expanding loan repayment assistance, and also just having conversations with people at school and making sure the ball keeps rolling while some of the more tangible asks like the petition get put into place. So I've been, meeting with Naomi regularly. Before I launched into this, I had conversations with Molly and Steve, and all of that is on top of just kind of having the network and the retreats and being able to plug into this national network of people who similarly see the potential of shifting the law to the left and shifting the law in a direction that really serves a better social purpose. Has just been a fantastic experience and hopefully can lead to some tangible gains.
Thanks so much for that, Ross. What Ross is doing is something that, like he said, we meet about it regularly. It's one of the first things I started doing when I started working at PPP. So it's near and dear to my heart. And it's also like very interesting. I feel like as a non-lawyer or law student, I'm always learning something from Ross. So I'm glad you guys got a second to learn from him too. As for now, I'm going to pass it over to Steve and he will introduce Sejal for us.
Hey, thank you. And thank you, Ross. I think one thing that I just want to highlight that kind of brought me to PPP in the first place, because I was actually a student organizer before I was on staff. One thing that I think is really important in what we do here is often I think for lawyers and law students, when you think of okay, I want to be involved with organizing, it's thought of more in terms of kind of like movement lawyering, like how can I work with other movements and that kind of thing, which is really important. But also there are a lot of opportunities for organizing among yourselves, right? So just having a space where you can see yourself as a worker, as somebody who is being impacted by some of these different policies that you can kind of organize around, I think is something that is a little bit foreign for some law students. And I think having a space where we can do that is really important. Ross has been a great example of making that kind of work. So I really appreciate you being here. And now I am happy to introduce Sejal Singh, who, as I said, is one of the co-founders of PPP, is on our 501c4 board. And Sejal, I would love to hear a bit about how how the organization started and what that experience was like, but I think even more so how you're able to bring that experience and what you all did with PPP out into your kind of professional career now as a practicing attorney.
Hi, everyone. It's really great to meet you. And as a former student organizer, so exciting to see all of you here. I, as Steve said, was one of the co-founders of People's Parity. And we started because, I think candidly, we started because we were really angry. We were law students who had, gone to school with a goal of using the law to advance justice, to build power for workers, to create a world where women were treated equally, to expand reproductive rights, to take on corporate abuses. And it became very clear very quickly. I don't think any of us were naive when we got to law school, and yet the system was so much more dominated by corporate power corporate power often wrapped up with right-wing power than, we imagined. And it was really eye-opening to realize that the majority of non-union private sector workers in America today are subject to a forced arbitration agreement that would prevent us from vindicating their rights in court. And not just preventing us from vindicating their rights in court as attorneys for workers, but as workers ourselves. We might be bound by these agreements and unable to do very much at all if we were being sexually harassed on the job or if we were being misclassified as independent contractors. And so we decided we wanted to organize um, to do something about this because it was so clear that the standard tools of the progressive legal movement, while they have important, as Molly said, like a critical role to play, especially now in reducing harm, that they were never going to build the world that we wanted. And, I always say the other side has a lot of money power, and the only way we're going to beat that is people power. So Molly answered one of my emails about this and showed up at a meeting at my house, and People's Parity was born. And I it's been a really special organizing home and political home for me since then. I continue to be involved with People's Parity as I've left law school and begun my career as an attorney. I found that it's been really helpful, both for giving me valuable frameworks and insights for thinking about the law as a tool for change, its opportunities and its profound limitations. And also it has helped expose me to lots of ways that attorneys can be, powerful advocates for justice outside of participating in sort of litigating in Article 3 courts, although I do some of that myself. Um, I was exposed to a lot of people who are engaged in policy and practicing law as state or federal administrators, regulators, enforcers, and that became a huge part of the early part of my career. I spent a lot of time at the Department of Labor over the last administration using my legal tools, like not to necessarily show up in court and like argue in front of a judge, but to change the regulations that bound corporate, held corporations accountable to sort of move the tools of the state. I also have done a lot of organizing around the legal profession as a profession. For example, not to jump ahead, but I currently organize with our DC Lawyers chapter, and some of the attorneys in our chapter are getting engaged in a campaign to block you won't. Well, I was going to say you won't believe this, but it's actually these days quite believable. Pam Bondi's brother is like a front runner for an important position at the DC bar. So we're going to do some organizing around that. And it's been really great, I think, to be with other attorneys who want to organize to improve the profession that we're all in. Finally, it has, not that we organize to, not that I organize for this reason, but it's definitely been really helpful for me professionally to have made a lot of connections to other progressive and left-wing lawyers across a wide range of spaces, worker protection, consumer protection, gender justice, racial justice. And that's helped me sort of in my career, but like more importantly, I think it has helped me form a wonderful community of people who are thinking about how to be lawyers for justice. And so, yes, like it's been a good network, but more importantly, it's been like it's helped me grow and pushed my thinking and given me people to think with.
So that's great. Thank you so much, Sejal. So I'm just watching the time here, and I said you want to give too much away here, so I just want to just like really quickly, if you want to talk through just a little bit more just about like the DC Lawyers chapter for just a couple minutes, like so you have the campaign you're working on, and just like what does that look like, kind of being, because I think our DC Lawyers chapter is like you all are kind of our you're like our headline lawyers chapter. So like, I feel like just for the lawyers on the call, if you can just give us a little bit of an idea of what kind of how that works and what that looks like organizing PPP like as a lawyer.
Sure. So our chapter has a especially deep commitment to the labor movement and to organizing to build power for workers within and without their workplace. And so that motivates a big portion of what we've chosen to work on. For example, I lead a series of Know Your Rights trainings that we run with local grassroots groups, which has been super fun. Um, and we just like I think it's been like a good mirroring of our various the things that we can bring. So like once a month, we organizers in our chapter like provide this like really detailed but also like I think that like a lot of Know Your Rights trainings, like people think like the people who are getting them can't understand complicated legal concepts, and we reject that idea. I actually think workers know a lot about what their workplaces are and are very capable and smart about how to, apply legal concepts to their workplace. And so we like do a workshop with like tip workers to talk about common tips violations. We are currently kind of in overdrive doing these for federal workers. We had more than 100 people sign up to our last training on federal workers' rights. Um, and we're hoping to, while we started at a once a month sort of pace, we are hoping to expand. And, as part of our trainings, like we have local organizers like coming and giving the pitch that, whatever people are always asking us, like, what can they do about the fact that they have a clopening shift and the fact that like they have to, which means like that's when you have to close your store at like 10 p.m. and then you have to be up at the ass crack of dawn the next morning and you can't get a decent night's sleep to open it again. And, we can talk about how like we could try to pass a city council law that would do something about that, or you could try to form a union and we like try to have union organizers in the room and it's really fun. And I think it's been good to sort of uh be lawyering. Yeah, it is like very lawyerly as an activity, but it is like feels really on the ground, and we're doing a lot to help people organize, and that feels really good. And yeah, as for trying to block Pam Bondi's brother, we just decided to do it like 5 hours ago, so I'll keep you posted.
Nice. That's awesome. So thank you so much for joining us, Sejal. I think this has all been really helpful to hear. And I'm gonna hand it off back to Molly now. So Molly, if you could just go through a bit of, I think especially in this moment, like while everything is just feels like is on fire. I think one of the things we hear from a lot of our organizers, from potential organizers, things like that, is just like what do we do? Like what does the vision look like? That kind of things. I think if you could give us an idea of just what um what the future looks like for PPP, what are some of the kind of like future plans, and what are some of the ways that folks can get involved?
Definitely. I will keep this short, especially because, or in part because I think so much of this is what we will want to talk about with all of you one-on-one in follow-up conversations, coffee chats, etc. But I want to highlight 4 areas that we're focused on as we look at the current environment that we find ourselves in places where we're committed to making sure that our chapters and our organizers are able to plug in. So I will say at the top that we are not the organization that is doing the most frontline organizing work in response to the harm that is being perpetrated by the Trump administration. That is not something that we are currently equipped to do. And there are a lot of organizations that are equipped to do that extremely well. So the first thing that we are thinking about is how are we making sure that we are able to plug our organizers, our chapters in with the organizations that are best situated in this moment to do the deportation defense, to do the support of workers who are threatened by the Trump administration that Sejal was talking about, to support Know Your Rights efforts. So we think that that is essential. And we think that the best way that we can support in many of those situations is by showing up, not by trying to recreate a wheel that others have already created and have created better. So we definitely want to make sure that there is a way for people who are involved with PPP to get involved with those efforts, but we don't think that we should be leading those because there are people who are experts at that. There are then 3 areas where we are focused on driving things forward and really trying to, again, support our chapters in driving forward. So the first is, as Ross talked about, combating public interest drift. and then supporting lawyers who want to be doing legal work that makes the world a better place. One of the things that we have heard repeatedly over the last few months, especially since the election, is that people are feeling like, I don't know how to engage in the fight to make the world better. Should I even try? Or should I make life a little bit easier on myself? Kind of go with what law school or the legal profession is pushing me towards, and maybe do some volunteer work in my spare time. And we think it's really important to continue to foster community that is holding people accountable to living out their values and supporting them to live out those values. So again, that goes for supporting law students, like Ross talked about, who are organizing on their campuses to make it easier to do public interest lawyering work, which is desperately needed right now. And then also supporting lawyers who might be working to transition to public interest work or who are trying to stay in that field at a time when public interest lawyers are actively under professional threat by this administration. So that's one thing. The other thing that we are doing is recognizing that in this moment, we are not going to be getting good, pro people, professionally diverse federal judges. But that doesn't mean that we can't be pushing to remake legal systems and build truly pro people legal systems at the state level. So we haven't talked a ton about state courts tonight, but that is a huge area of focus for us and one that we think is essential right now when the federal judiciary. The reality is, we know that by the end of this administration, Trump could have appointed up to 50% of all active federal judges. He could have personally appointed 2/3 or more of sitting Supreme Court justices. The federal judiciary is not going to be a place that we are able to depend on to protect our rights, to enforce the law, etc. So it's really, really critical that we put in the work now to be building pro people state courts wherever possible. And the same goes, I will also say, like, looking at legislative opportunities at the state level. Sejal talked about some of our campaigns against forced arbitration clauses, really thinking about places where we might be able to have an impact on building a legal system that better serves working people at the state and local level, even if we can't always do that at the federal level right now. And then the third place that we are really leaning in on, as I previewed kind of in the first part of this, is thinking about what comes after the Trump administration and what are we building towards, and what power do we need to be building now so that we can make the fundamental structural societal changes when we have the opportunity to. So sort of the way we've been thinking about it and talking about it is, if you look internationally, if you look historically, the reality is, and sorry to bring us to kind of a dark place in our last 20 minutes of this session, but the reality is that most countries do not move as far down the path to authoritarianism as we have, and then come back to it without a large scale disruption. That's just the reality that we're dealing with at a moment where the country is really moving away from embracing democracy and towards authoritarianism. Our hope and our goal and what we are working towards is ensuring that that major disruption is structural court reform, structural democracy reform. So looking at what would it mean to build a true democracy in the place of juristocracy, and certainly in the place of an authoritarian government, or a competitive authoritarian government. What would it look like to rethink the role of unelected, unaccountable legal elites in our system of government? How do we change that? How do we build democracy here? And how do we make that the response to both the Trump administration and sort of the failures of the juristocracy, neoliberalism, et cetera, of the past? So I will say that a lot of that work, like we're not whipping votes in Congress right now for court reform. We don't think that we are going to pass any legislation in the next couple of years. But we also know that we likely would not have been able to do the structural democracy reform needed if Kamala Harris had been elected, right? We have not done the organizing work necessary. We have not built the power necessary in order to make those larger changes. So what we need to be doing over the next 2, 3, 4 years is building that power, is putting forward a coherent vision, is making sure that when we do have, if we have a moment to make that big pro-democracy reform, that we are able to take advantage of it. So, we can get more in the Q&A or in follow-up conversations into what that looks like. A lot of it is doing the organizing, building public support, advancing the conversation in ways that it hasn't yet been advanced, even on law school campuses or within the legal profession in many instances. So happy to talk more about any of that, but that's a bit of how we are thinking about PPP's role and our chapter's role in this moment.
Thanks so much, Molly. Real quick, Steve, Molly mentioned coffee chats. So we do have Calendly meetings in which PPP staff will set aside a little bit of time and you can learn a little bit more about PPP that you didn't hear today or have questions that may not be answered in the few minutes that we have left because time has went by real fast. So I posted in the chat some coffee chats with me, Molly, or Steve. I also posted a link to a prospective member or chapter meeting, which is a little bit longer, and you'll get a lot of bit more information from me and Steve in that. I'll leave it to you, Steve.
So thanks, Naomi. It's funny, I was just pulling those up myself, so it's perfect. So yeah, I think I can speak for anyone on staff here. Like Naomi said, anytime you want to meet to talk through, ways to get involved, or even just, to kind of like bullshit because things are bad. Like that is fine too. It's like this is part of what we do. We make time for the community that we're building. So always feel free to hop into those Calendlys and set some meetings. So with that, I want to thank all of our speakers for sharing their experiences. That was awesome. And we can move into questions. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we can address that. All right, thank you, Eli. So as far as local chapters, you can, on our website, I pull this up real quick, but on our website, you can see where we do have chapters. Generally, if you want to get in touch with them, the easiest way to do that is actually just like through us. So if you send an email to, DC, perfect, well, Sagel's here. I don't know if you'd like to share your email maybe, but I'll drop my email here, and anytime for anybody, if you want to if there is a chapter in your area, you can send us an email and we'll connect you with whoever the kind of lead organizers are in the area. And if you go onto the website, you see like we don't have a chapter there. That's where you would, set a meeting with me and Naomi. We can talk through what that would look like if you wanted to get something started. We do have, we provide a lot of support, like when you want to get something going. So like whether it's a student chapter or a lawyer's chapter, there's a lot that we can do to kind of like work through with you and kind of decide what that would look like structurally, and also just practically provide support to kind of like actually pull it together. So yeah, feel free to send us an email, set a meeting, and we can go through that. Any other questions? Oh, actually, sorry, I'm just noticing that Sagel's email, I think just went to us.
Oh,
So
sorry. I'll make sure
you
that
did, I
goes to
got it.
everyone.
Yeah, no, I make that mistake all the time in webinars. Okay, so that should be good. All right, does anyone have any other questions? Oh, man, on Friday. I mean, let Naomi answer that one.
You know what? Let me fix that. I am not available at 12 a.m. on a Friday. So sorry about that, Bill, but unfortunately, I'm asleep at 12 a.m. on a Friday. But any other time within like working legal limits, as lawyers, I'm sure y'all should know those. I'm available.
Yeah, so we'll double check those, make sure we're
But I'll fix that but before the end of this meeting.
Yes. Other questions?
So I don't see a lot of questions on here. So Steve, I don't know what you're thinking. Maybe giving people back 10 minutes.
Yep, I think that makes sense. Before we do that, I'm going to drop one more
Wait,
thing.
I already typed it up. I already typed it up because I love the name.
Perfect.
Our next steps are gonna be Steve, bring us into our next steps.
Yeah, so for people who are interested, I mean, obviously, like we said, if you went through this info session, you're like, yep, this is for me. Awesome. I want to get involved right now. Set a meeting with me and Naomi. If you are just like interested in learning a little more, or either about getting involved with PPP and kind of how we're thinking, or you just want to learn about all the ways that law school and the legal profession are brainwashing you. You can join us for our next event, Gangsters of the Status Quo. So that will be focused on, again, it'll look a little bit at some of what Ross mentioned, like we're looking at things like public interest drift, that kind of thing, and also just like norms within the legal profession that kind of lead us towards a lot of the kind of negative outcomes that Molly was talking about. So, the things where we're really just like supporting capital instead of people, that kind of thing. So we'll be going through doing a little bit of a deeper dive there, both in what contributes to that and how we can respond. So we'd love to have you all join us there. We'll send that link again in a follow-up email after this event. But if we don't have any other questions, then yeah, I think we'll give you all your 10 minutes back. And thank you all for being here. And hopefully we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you all for attending and thank you all for speaking with us today. Have a nice day, night, not 12 o'clock.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Great to meet you all.